Welcome to Evolution on the Mic. I am your host, Ariana de la Cruz.
And I'm your co-host, Antoine Dove.
And we are back, season 6, Faith in God, episode 2, New Financial Hardships, Same Faithful God. In our last episode, we talked about having faith in God and how our 2025 goals require action. We explored how trusting God can help us achieve those goals and learned that while our goals may be new, God remains unchanging. Faithful he is. On today's episode, y'all, we're going to dive into the topic of financial hardships and how faith in God can carry us through. But before we get into all that, Antoine, how are you? How you been? How's your week been, buddy?
The week's going good. I'm one of these people. I've been a little bit laxed on getting going with my gym routine. It is that time of year. We all have our New Year's resolutions, and it's my daughter was here. I just finished getting her back to LA, and shout out hearts and love to everyone in LA and what you guys have gone through with the fires.
Yeah.
My heart goes to everyone. I'm praying all the time. My daughter was impacted by it. Fortunately, they didn't lose anything, but they still had to evacuate, and it's a lot. And we take stuff like that for granted, and like the things that we don't go through. Like we don't have fires here in North Carolina, but like my heart goes out to people when you're going to those disasters that just displace people. But coming back from that and coming back here to North Carolina, I've just kind of been putting off my gym routine. I haven't been on it. And so I finally started getting back into the gym and getting my routine. And boy, I have to tell you, it hurts, man. It's been tough kind of finding that rhythm, but it feels good. Like it hurts going through the process, but it feels good when you start to get back into your flow and things start to go back to normal. Because I feel like the holidays just takes us out of our
Yeah,
rhythm.
it definitely does.
Yeah. So, but that's where I'm at right now. Just getting back into the routine, getting this new year kicked off right, getting involved with things going on this new year. I'm just, I'm ready. I'm ready for the things to come and how God's going to show up in so many awesome ways this year. But what's going on with you? Last we
Awesome.
talked, you were still in that phase of getting things together for this big move to Costa Rica. How's the
Yeah, I'm
planning?
getting closer. I'm getting closer. So,
Okay.
I don't know if the last time that I mentioned it, I had already like picked my apartment in Costa
Okay.
Rica that I want to live in. But I finally, narrowed it down, and now I'm just waiting for my agreement to come in, my contract, so that I can book my flight and everything like that. But it looks like I'll be moving mid-March, and that's I'm pretty certain at this point about that now that I know where I'm going to be living and my apartment. So I'm very excited. I'm so happy. I feel like, like really having that faith in God, and this whole season we're talking about, like I am, really practicing what I'm preaching, because, I've been scared out of my behind with this process and everything that God has for me, because, I'm doing everything with my spiritual eye. I am doing nothing with my human eyes. Everything I'm doing is because God told me, and he told me he's going to lead me, and he told me that he has my back, and this is what he's asking of me, and I'm just following. And it is a bit scary, and I'm like very excited because I know that it's going to work out better than what I ever could have imagined for myself living in Costa Rica. It's this weird feeling now that it's getting closer. I feel very connected to Costa Rica. I feel very connected to the like everything that I'm doing, and I didn't for a while. I was like, God, is this me? Is this you? And I'm finally in a place where I hear him loudly and clearly, and I know that is my time, and that he's with me, and that everything will work out. So I'm just excited. I'm in a very good place, a little overwhelmed with juggling the move and juggling, my business, but all is well. You know what I mean? I just have to get better at time
Mhm.
management. If other than that, everything is it's pretty amazing on this end.
I love it. I love to hear that. Your faith is incredible. I swear, like since you and I just started talking on this podcast, and I mean, for those that don't know, I've known Ariana even before this podcast, but her dream has always been to move to Costa Rica. I remember her talking about it even when we were in our
Really?
investing group. I really, yeah, in our real estate investing group. She's like,
I don't remember that.
I'm gonna have
Oh,
me a house in Costa Rica that's on a cliff that overlooks the ocean. Like
oh
that's
wow.
my thing, and
Yeah.
it's beautiful. Like I love it because through this podcast we get a chance to hear this, and then we see it to come to pass, and we see it, everything you've manifested come to life, and it's just an awesome representation of how strong your faith is in God and how God shows up for you. And I think to me that's encouraging for someone who's going through and still finding my way and doing things. Like it's really
Yeah.
encouraging.
Yeah, especially thinking back to the beginning of the year, right? I was moving from my old apartment, which I was in my prior apartment prior to living here. I was there like 7, 8 years and in that community. And moving was very emotional for me. I was going through it. Like I didn't really want to leave, but again, I felt God pushing me and tugging me into this luxurious high rise, on a marina, overseeing the beach. Like, it was like a part of me wanted to stay where I was at. It's like I didn't see what God saw in me. Like it was like I didn't see myself the way God saw me. I felt like where I was at was me, and I was very content and happy where I was at. But it's like God had other plans for me. But the rent here was double what I was paying over there. And not only that, my rent, a big portion of my rent was getting paid by my company that I was working for. So I was
Oh.
not used to paying that much rent for years because it got covered by my last boss that I was when I had a 9 to 5, right? Because I was in property management, the apartment complex that I lived in, was we managed that apartment for many years. So, my boss always kept my rent, pretty low. So I wasn't used to paying rent. And then my rent got doubled from the rent that was the real rent that I from the apartment I lived in. So I remember moving here, like God really, like, yes, I'm making good money, but I'm a business owner now. And how am I gonna make it through? It was very, my mind was kind of very scared. So I remember
Mhm.
going through a lot of issues when it came to my finances. Yes, I wasn't in a financial, I wasn't really much in a tight financial place, but as a business owner, like, you don't know what money you're really going to make because there's no salary coming in. There's no boss writing you a paycheck, right? So you're really relying, for me, on a higher power. I'm relying on God to provide the clients, provide, the people, places, and things in my life, because on my own, I was like, how is this going to happen? I was also used to getting a check, every 2 weeks consistently from my boss when I have a 9 to 5. So, I think about where I'm at now, and, things have gotten better for me, but still feeling a little bit of fear moving to a whole nother country, taking my business over there. With the Wi-Fi going to work, and my phone's going to work? Am I still going to be able to handle my clients? Like this things that come up when it comes to being financially okay, that I noticed has been a trend in my life. So I think about, like, when money is tight, how do we keep our faith that God will provide? Like, I think about that because that's kind of been a trend in my life. You know what I mean? Feeling like, okay, I have enough for now, but am I going to keep it? Or maybe I'm thinking, like when I first moved from New York to Florida, I was in a very sticky situation because, when it came to my finances and really feeling like my finances was tight, at that time I was living with my mom, and I
Hmm.
was making a pretty good salary in New York, working at Brookdale Hospital as a social worker. Essentially, I was over there, and I remember I didn't have to pay rent. I didn't have to buy groceries. I didn't have to pay bills. Like, my mom did everything. I was living with my mom. I was in, my early 20s. And when I moved to Florida to move in with my ex, I had to split the rent. I had to split the groceries. I had to pay the bills. And I was like, and I came over here I took a pay cut to the
Mhm.
social work
Oof.
job that I had here. And I'm like, okay, God, I know you called me to Florida. Like, you did this, but I am scared, right? Like, I don't feel like I'm going to make it. Like, am I going to embarrass myself? Like, the last thing I want is to make this drastic move and I have to go back to New York and everybody laughs at me. I'm the laughing stock of the family. Like, you see, we knew she couldn't do it. And there was
Mm.
one thing I told myself, like, I'm going to make it in Florida. I'm going to get my master's degree in Florida. Like, I was telling myself these things, encouraging myself, but in the back of my mind, there was a little fear voice. Like, you know what I mean? Like, what if you fail? What if you don't do the things you're gonna do? Like, what if your laziness finally gets to you and you just don't do nothing that you're gonna do? Because tends to be lazy at times, like, I'm human. So I was going through it, I remember. And for a year that I was here with my ex, we were splitting the bills, and then that didn't work out. And I had to go move out on my own, and my paycheck didn't change. I was still in the same job, still in the same position. And I was like, damn, God, like, my savings has dwindled. I only have hundreds in my bank account. Like, how am I going to make this work? Like, we're not working out. I have to find my own place. More bills are going to be put on me, and I don't know how I'm going to make it. So I ended up getting into a roommate situation for like 6 months. And I remember it wasn't a very good like experience for me with that roommate because I was having issues with my dog. I would leave for work and he'll be barking. So they didn't really like my dog. And I just remember feeling like depleted, like I'm alone here in Florida. My relationship didn't work out. Like I suck at relationships, personal like relationships, like, romantic. And I'm like, like God, like what am I doing here? Like I started to second guess. I started to doubt. I started to feel, like I started just putting myself down, you know what I mean, at that time, because my savings went to the hundreds. And I was like, wanting to have my own place, my own space. And I just didn't see that how that was possible, you know. But I had to kick in my faith that God will provide,
Mhm.
and I had to, really put myself in a place of trust and trusting his timing that he's going to make it work out for me. So I remember I just let it go. I left it in God's hands. Like, God, I'm going to stay here as long as you need me to stay here. I know that you have my back. I know that you are going to provide for me because you did not call me all the way to Florida for me to fail. I know you didn't do that for me. And I remember just really working hard at work. I remember I'll go in early, leave late. If anybody needed help, I'll be the one to volunteer to help. Like I just kept being of service. I just kept showing up. I just kept doing the things that I know God had called me and would want me to do. And I just completely let go of my situation, that I had a roommate that, Prince barking. Sometimes I will bring him to work. And I just surrendered to all of that. And within a couple months of me being in that roommate situation, I got promoted to supervisor, and my salary increased so much so that I was able to put a deposit of first, at last, and security into a new apartment. And I was just astonished because I was like, wow, I totally just surrendered to my situation. You know what I mean? And just kept doing the things that God kept calling me to do. And I was only in that job as a case manager for 6 months. To get promoted to a supervisor when you only have experience doing something for 6 months speaks a lot. But that to me speaks a lot, not of me, but it speaks a lot of God,
Mhm.
that God will provide, right? That God has our backs, that when God calls us to something, is not for us to fail, is not to see us fail. That when God calls us to something, is he knows exactly what he's going to do. And we just have to keep following in that path that he has for us. That's it, blindly, like wholeheartedly, with full surrender, knowing that he's in control. So I know that a lot of us go through this. Like a lot of us are in situations where, we're, or maybe our money is tight, our situation is tight, or, we're not able to come up with the full rent, or maybe we're in eviction, or maybe our car's about to get repo, like things that are going on in our lives. And we're just like, how can I trust in God? How can my faith kick in this situation, in this moment, that God is going to provide for me? And I'm just going to tell you that everything that is happening in your life, it is not there to harm you. It is there to teach you something. And it is there to maybe show you, like, maybe my faith is not completely in alignment, right? Maybe I'm thinking my faith is, but it isn't, you know? Maybe, instead of me being more giving and being more of service, I'm more withholding and keeping, right? And when those things start happening, God keeps taking, because we have to learn a lesson there. God wants us to completely trust. He wants us to completely surrender. He wants us to completely give of our resources, of our time resources, of whatever small finances we do have. He wants us to give of the little bit we have, and showing that faith and showing gratitude that we are still alive, that we still have our health, that we still have our sight, our taste, our senses, because those are blessings in itself. And he wants us to be grateful for all of that, and everything else will eventually work out. And I'm so glad that, God did that for me, because I really thought that things weren't really going to work out, or that I would have to wait years before I was able to get my own place. And God just had me wait like 2 months in that roommate situation, because I noticed, though, what I did was I switched my mind from me being in control to like telling God, you got this. I don't know what else to do. This is my situation, but I know you called me here, and I know that you are going to make it work for me, you know? So like, I don't know, like, Anton, if this is something that, like, you've seen yourself in, but you know,
Yeah, I definitely. I mean, I'm listening to you, and it's taken me back to so many parts of my life over this past like year and a half, where I was let go from my job. I too made the decision that I was not at that time. I was not interested in going back to work a W-2 job. That was just not something I wanted to do. quite honestly, I was burnt out from it. I didn't feel like I was growing from working in a W-2 environment. And I just told God, I said, I'm going to trust you that you have something bigger and greater for me than just running back doing the same old, same old. Like, I know you have something better for me. And I felt it. I felt it deep in my heart that God had called me for something more than just the average. He's like, no, and I think that's important. I'm going to pause there because I think it's important that we all understand that. Like, sometimes we go through life thinking that the position we're in that moment, that was the position that we were supposed to be in. But I'm telling you, if you feel any discomfort, if there's anything on the inside of you that's like, this just don't feel right, I feel like I'm not being my true self, I feel like I'm not being and stepping into my full potential, that is God saying, I'm calling you to something more and it's time for you to move. And I know for me, that was what I was feeling. I just, when I lost my job, I knew I could have went back and worked another job and picked up someplace somewhere else. But I was in my head saying, no, like, this doesn't feel right. I don't feel the fulfillment. I don't feel the pull to go back into that type of environment. I feel like God has something more for me. And what's beautiful about that is, that's where this podcast opportunity was born because Ariana and I started working on the podcast. There's just some beautiful things that came out of me in that moment, trusting God and what He had for me. But when it came to money was tight. I mean,
Mm,
I went from making really, really good money with bonuses and all these other things to literally like making minimum wage. In most cases, not even having money. I lived off of my severance for a good bit until that was gone. And then I was still struggling. And the one thing that I learned throughout that entire process was that I had to remove me and I had to put Him in the forefront of everything. And when I say Him, I had to put God in the forefront of everything.
mm-hmm,
Because the more I focused on me and where I was at, the deeper and deeper I dug my hole. The deep, like, I couldn't trust people. I didn't want to even trust Him and what He was calling me to do.
mm,
And your experience about you trusting brings up an example in my life where, and I'll never forget it. I'm sitting there and I'm watching TD Jakes on TV, and I was living in the house that I was in at the time. I had to wait to try to get out of my lease. I didn't have a lot of money, period. And I was, doing what most people do. When you don't have money, you're home. So I'm home and I'm watching YouTube and I'm watching TD Jakes on TV, and he is pouring a sermon out that is speaking to my soul. I mean, speaking to the depths of my soul. I could feel everything. I felt like he was talking directly to me. And then had an altar call, and then they were asking people to sow in this moment. He says, I feel there's someone out there in which God is calling you to sow into this ministry, and I want you to sow into this. And he's saying, and all I could feel, like everything, if you've ever experienced this, I got tingles all over my body, and I could feel, and I just knew that was the moment God was calling me to trust Him. And in that moment, without the blink of an eye, I went to sow, and I said, well, God, how much should I sow? And the number that came up to me was $50. Now, I did not have
wow.
$50 in this moment. Like, I had it, but it was kind of like one of those
Yeah.
situations where it's like, all right, I can invest this $50, but that means I'm not going to be able to put gas in my car. I'm not going to be able to get a few groceries and type of thing. Like, I don't know that I really want to do this. I was like, God, you sure? You sure it's $50? I don't know it's 50. I think I heard you wrong. And he's like, no, $50. I want you to sow $50. And in that moment, I sold $50 in faith. Like, I knew in that moment that what God was telling me to do, I had completely removed myself, stripped me from it, and I
Yeah.
listened to what He called me to do. And in that moment, as soon as I paid the $50, it was gone. And I was like, all right, God, I turned the TV off. I went on doing my thing. And within a matter of 2 hours, I had some old sneakers that I was selling to try to generate some cash because that's what you do when you don't have any money. I'm selling everything that I have that I don't need anymore. Within 2 hours of me investing that $50, I ended up selling my sneakers for $250 profit from what I posted them on this site, which means I saw a 5x return on what I invested in the ministry of TD Jakes. Now, that in that moment, and even now, I'm still getting chills thinking about it. In that moment, that was when I had my awakening. That was when I realized that
Yeah.
when things are tight, whenever God's calling us to do something and He's calling us to follow Him and He's calling us to invest and He's calling us to sow and whatever He's calling us to do, what He's really calling us to do is to take ourselves and move ourselves to the background and bring Him to the foreground. Remove self. He's not looking for self. He's looking for us to do because he's calling us to do. We are
Yeah.
vessels that he's called us to do something great, and he wants to use all of us. Every single person listening to this podcast, you have a talent. You have a gift that God has called you to do, and you're not even exercising your gift to the level that you need to exercise it to because you got too much self in what you're doing. Remove self and put him, and I guarantee you when you do that, the fold is 5, 10, 20x. And it starts with first being obedient and understanding what he's calling you to and not even second guessing it, just doing it. So when it comes to money and money being tight, and you're wondering, well, how do I do this? Like, how do I have the faith to keep going on when I know money's tight? It starts with just doing what God has called you to do, not second guessing it. And trust me, he will open a way. And from that one thing that he does, when you do the one action he's called you to do, that God has called you to do, and you see the benefits of it, and you start to do it more and more and more, it's like a domino effect. Before you know it, you don't even second guess. You just do because God has called you to do, and you know that no matter what you do, he will provide. And that's been my experience, and that's how I've became and got where I am today in dealing with everything, is because I've had to relinquish that feeling of self, remove me out of the equation, and make God the center of everything that I'm doing.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful and that's so impactful. I think I remember when you mentioned that to me. I don't know if we were shooting the podcast or was it just a conversation between me and you that you mentioned like, oh my God, Ariana, this happened to me. But I remember it was impactful then, and it's just as equally impactful now, knowing that you didn't really have it right. Your money was tight, like you know what I mean. You were living off your severance, and looking for another place to move into, trying to downsize and everything like that, and God puts in your heart to sow from the little that you have, sow something. And you could have said, well, what's $50 to this ministry? Like, that's nothing. That's just a drop in the bucket. And
Right.
you totally said, this is in my heart. Is I don't have it. I don't know what's gonna happen next. Like, but I'm gonna do that. And immediately God provides for you. You know what I mean? It's so beautiful to know that God can provide us with anything, right? God is omnipresent. He's everywhere. God is abundant, right? God is unlimited, right? God is the source of everything for everyone. And all we need to do is show God, God, I know that you're going to have my back. From my resources that I have, I am going to pour into another. From what I have, I am going to surrender control because I do not have control over my situation. But from the what I have that you gave me, this is all I have. I'm going to give some of it out. And I know that you have me no matter what. And when you give like that, since God is unlimited and he's abundant, he's going to tenfold, fivefold, 100-fold what it was that we gave. But it's not giving with the understanding that I know I'm doing this because I want something in return, right? It's giving from your heart. It's giving because you want to be of service and you are being obedient to what God is calling you to do. It's not, well, my ego is like, well, I'm going to give away a phone because it's, the 13 and I want the 16. So let me give this away because I want the 16. So I know God is going to give it back to me. No, you don't give to receive, right? You're giving from your heart. You're giving from a sense of obedience, knowing that God is going to have your back no matter what. We're not looking to get something in return. We're just looking to be obedient to God and giving from our hearts, knowing that God has our back and that we will never be without. Even if it looks like it may be that way, we're never going to be without. And it brings me back to something that, even my best friend does. She told me like she started tithing 10% of like, her finances. And I remember telling myself, damn, I don't even tithe 10%. You know what I mean? I do not go to church as often as I should. But when I do, tithe. But, she's a religious tither. And I remember like when we first left, when she first left her 9 to 5, she was telling me that, her family, they're still tithing. And I just know I've seen the fruits of that in her life. Like no matter what, she's always good. Like things are always coming through for her and her family. And I'm just like, wow, like I'm seeing faith in action every day with my best friend in her life, because she just lives her life very in obedient, as like a lot based on what God tells her to do, and she does it. And it's like, she doesn't care if she stays without. She's going to give of every little thing that she has because she's very obedient, right? She's giving from her heart. She's doing what God is calling her to do. And for some reason, she's always good, always has been, always will be for the rest of her life because, you know, she lives by those standards. And it seems hard to do for the person that doesn't know God, doesn't have faith in God. You know, it seems like, oh, you know, because we want to like shelter everything that we have. We want to hoard everything that we have, you know, but what is that doing for you? Hoarding what you have, you're just keeping what you have or diminishing what you have. But when you give of what you have from your heart, right? Or being obedient to God and knowing that God is in control, that God has your back, that God will never leave you without, you are going to reap so much more than that. And initially what you're going to reap, it might not be something tangible, but what you're going to reap is a peace of mind. What you're going to reap is knowing God has my back because I am already totally surrendered. My hands are up. My heart is open. I do not know what to do, but I know in this moment, I am being obedient. I'm being of service. I'm giving all my resources. And that is going to automatically initially give you that sense of peace and calmness, knowing that you have someone on your corner, knowing that you're not alone, knowing that you're walking in this journey with someone that loves you so much, that loves you more than you can ever feel for yourself because he created us. And walking with God gives you that peace, gives you that sense of love, of support, of encouragement, that you just completely surrender of all your resources, of everything that you have, and you do not think twice. Like you said, Antoine, you gave the $50, you turned off the TV, you went about your day. That's it. You went about your night. 2 hours later, you tenfold, fivefold the $50. And that is how God works. He wants to just show us, I have your back. Do you trust me? Do you trust me enough? You know, this is your last cup of water and I know you're thirsty, but you see your neighbor's thirsty. Are you going to give that water or are you going to quench your own thirst? God is like, I'm your water. I want to quench your thirst. All you need is me. I got you. Go ahead and give that to that person. And when you do that, you know what I mean? That water turns into 2 or 3. Like it may not be immediately, but it will come. And God just wants us to show us that, like, you know what I mean? Like, I got you. I'm your provider. I have your back. Just have faith in me. Look at me. Stay here. Like, stay locked in because, you know, nothing or no one in this world can do what I can do for you. Nothing or no one. So just be obedient by me and everything will work out. And I've, you know what I mean? And in hearing your example, and in rehearing my example of when I was in that roommate situation in Florida alone, having a job that was not paying me much, not knowing how I was going to get out of it, the steps that I did was I surrendered. God, I know you have a plan for me. I know you have me here for a reason. You didn't bring me to Florida to see me fail. I'm just going to surrender that you have a plan. I'm not in control. You're in control. And I immediately went and worked harder than I ever had in that job. I poured my all into that job. I poured my all into my patients. I poured my all into my colleagues, my coworkers, whatever they needed, I was there. But I didn't do that because I want a reward from God. I was doing that because I felt led to that, because I had completely surrendered to God, completely, of my life, of my everything, because I knew that on my own, I was going to mess it up. But I know with God, he has everything planned out so perfectly for me and makes everything just flow in a beautiful way that I can never on my own conjure. I couldn't do it. And I seen how that turned into like 2 months later, an offer to get promoted. So that drastically changed the course of my life. That apartment that I ended up getting, quick story, because this is beautiful, love it. That apartment that I ended up landing after that roommate situation, I was driving one day to court because I was a social worker and I would go to court and testify to see if the family can reunite with their kids. So I remember one day I'm driving to court and there was always this body of water that I would drive past whenever I would go to court. And I would always look at the body of water and these little buildings that were sitting right by the water. And I said, God, I would love to live there one day. Right. And I said that every day for months, going to whenever I had court. When I Craigslist apartments, the first apartment that came up that I actually called and went to tour was one of the apartments that I would look at. I said, God, I want to live there one day. That same day that I went into that apartment complex, and she like, walked me back to the back of the community where an apartment was available. It was right by the water. And I looked at the body of water and I was like, oh, hell no, I want this apartment right now. I want it right now. I went to Chase. I got my deposit. I put my deposit and I signed my lease, and I was moved out of my apartment within 2 weeks. That same apartment complex that I was driving past every day by the body of water, I ended up living in for 8 years. I was in a messed up situation with that roommate, having issues with my dog not being happy there. And I just stayed faithful to God. You have a plan for me. You didn't bring me here for no reason. I know it. And he came through. That's just who he is, not only for me. That's just who he is for everyone that believes in him, for everyone that surrenders to him, for everyone that trusts him, that trusts his timing, that is obedient, that does what he asks you to do, not what you want to do, what's comfortable for you. Just do what he's asking you to do, and do not count the minutes, the hours, the days, the years. Just keep doing what he's asking you to do day by day. And trust me, he's going to come through in a more bigger, beautiful, impactful way than you can ever imagine or conjure up for yourself. This is just who God is. He is beautiful. He is amazing. And he loves us, and he loves you very much. And this is what he wants to do in your life. This is why he had us come here today on this podcast to speak directly to you, because he wants for you to just follow him, connect with him, be obedient to him. And there's nothing that you cannot have. There's nothing that you cannot do. There's nothing that you cannot be when you are in close connection with him. And that's all that he's asking of you. It doesn't matter what you've done in the past. Doesn't matter the things that you regret. Doesn't matter anything. He just wants you to hold his hand, let him hold your hand, and let him be your guide. Let him guide you. And let him, even though it's scary and it feels dark, let him be your light. Because that's what God is for us. He's our light. And let him pour into you, because he loves to pour into us. We can never do this on our own. We're not, you know what I mean? Like we're great and we're amazing humans, but we become even greater, amazing humans when we have God on our side, when we have God in us. He can align things in his timing in such a perfection that we're just going to be in awe. And everything that you sacrificed, everything that you struggled with, every pain that you felt, every sorrow, everything is worth it. It's like you forget about it. You forget the pain that you went through to get to the other side, because once you're there, it's like a whole new life. Then it's like you look back and you're like, thank you, God, for carrying me through that. That was kind of scary. That was hard. That was difficult. Like I didn't know how I was going to make it through, but wow, I'm here. And it's so much better than what I thought, so much better than I prayed for, so much better than I've asked for, so much better than I could have imagined or drawn up if I could have drawn a beautiful picture. This picture is so much better than I could have done myself. And I can only do that, God, because I believe in you, and I have faith in you, and I trust you and your timing.